Okay, I left it a little late to come in with this next video because I had commitments. I have changed cup. That's the one honoring of Mercury, because I do kind of feel like as we learn to connect with these planets and also sunlight in my beautiful little sunny afternoon cottage. Well, it's sunny in the morning and in the afternoon actually, but I feel I'm realizing for filming, afternoon's not the best. Anyway, this is what we have. So back to what I was saying about the planets is once we learn to honor them sort of archetypally as these gravitational bodies of energy that are influencing our lives, I kind of do like to feel like I'm listening to them. So something just before I show you my chart and we talk about that I just thought I would point out is I know I haven't done this with the other cards, and every planet, every sign, in fact, even has a card in the major arcana of the tarot. And I just wanted to show you this one because this is the Mercury card. It's the Magician. And what's so interesting about it is he's holding his staff. It's the first card. So the very first card is a 0. This is the first as a number 1. And the 0 card is the Fool, and it's all about the Fool's journey. And then when we get to this first place, in the first sort of step, once we've surrendered as the Fool, which is actually a Uranus card, as soon as we've surrendered into the journey, like the shock of the new and the unknown, we hit Mercury's card, which is the Magician, which is another reason we were speaking about Hermeticism and Hermetic studies and how there's that current of magic and mysticism in that, particularly magic more than mysticism, but both. And here we can kind of see that represented in the card itself, where you have this man with one hand facing the earth and one hand facing the heavens, with that infinity symbol of the dualistic nature of Mercury, or you could think of Gemini, any of the dual energies, balancing both sides of the brain. So it's as above, so below, as right, so left, kind of as within, so without. It's bringing in all of those. And then you can see on his table represented the pentacles, the cups, the swords, and the wands, the 4 suits, which are fire, water, earth, and what did I not just say? Fire, water, earth, and air. Air is the element we're in. And learning, I've got the raw materials. Now I have to learn how to use the tools. And that's, again, Mercury is very much about learning. Mercury loves, loves, loves information. So I just thought I would show that. And now I just want to pop into my chart to show you the story. Okay, so we're going to see here. That is me, yes. Because I am a Gemini, here I am, there's my sun in Gemini, and we know that Gemini is ruled by Mercury. We would say, because I have my sun in that chart, I actually am Mercury in my chart, because my sun, because Gemini, a Gemini is ruled by Mercury. So now we look for Mercury, and here's my Mercury in Cancer. So Mercury in Cancer in a water sign, it's not one of the places it loves or hates. It's kind of a little bit more neutral. But Mercury, I feel, Mercury's not kind of at his best in some ways in water, because Mercury is about thinking and water is about feeling. So when you have your Mercury, for me, it's often very hard to distinguish thoughts and feelings from one another. And it's like I think very emotionally, actually. And so sometimes I can really think myself. And also, I know it looks like my Mercury is in the 11th house, but it's actually in the 12th house. It's right on the cusp, but it gets pushed into the 12th. So we might look at that if we looked at our, and I'm not going to flip back to the 12th house, for you to read the keywords. You can do that with your own, but obviously because I know them quite well, I'm just going to speak off the cuff here. But 12th house is hidden things and hidden enemies. And you might say, with my mind in the 12th house, Mercury being my mind, you might say that I can be my own worst enemy. I can be the hidden enemy. And that's very true. I'll tell you a personal story about me when I was a depressive teenager, suicidal and just really not okay. I would get compliments from people. And I remember this so clearly. I would get compliments from people and I would give myself a whole heap of insults because I couldn't. Oh, I hope you can't hear my landlord's doing something down at the house, the main house. I hope it's not translating too strongly on here. But I couldn't correlate it felt to me vain, or I didn't feel comfortable accepting a compliment. And this is really interesting also because I'm a Leo rising. So my sun is being ruled by Mercury, but the whole chart is being ruled by my sun because the sun rules Leo. We'll get to that in August. So I have this combination of there is a need to shine, there is a need to be complimented, but also like hating that and feeling all the wrong things about it. So I would literally take the compliments and bombard myself internally, my thinking, my conversations, my internal narrative with insults. And many years later, I mean, this is part of the thing that got me to do the work I do, so I don't regret it now, but many years later, when I started to learn about how, from a survival standpoint, we actually need to, if we needed to remember that those red berries were poisonous, much more than we needed to remember that we like smelling roses. It was a survival thing. So when we have something negative happen, it impacts us, in fact, 7 times more strongly than an easy thing happening. So, for example, if you are giving yourself one insult, you should be giving yourself 7 compliments to counteract your one insult, not even to improve on things, to just counteract it. And I was going the other way. And it was partly that, me becoming the enemy, me allowing myself to become consumed and emotionally overwrought and distraught and stopping eating and getting depressed, that helped me to get on my path. So you can also see how sometimes the problem is actually a gift in disguise, a blessing in disguise. So that is an interesting thing about Mercury for me in the 12th in Cancer, because Cancer is also the sign of the motherer, the sign of the nurturer. So now I'm going to go look at my Cancer things and I'm going to go, well, really what my internal narrative should be is super nurturing and mothering. But what I've always done is I've outsourced that. I mothered my siblings when I was very little. I mothered all my friends. I mother animals like acutely. I mother my children intensely. Maybe sometimes smother them. I mothered my husband through his addiction. I overed everything, but the internal loving mother wasn't showing up. Okay, that's to a point. Obviously, I've been doing work on that, but I can still default into that everybody else's needs first. And that's like a really good thing for me to be aware of, and it's okay, it's in my stars, so I actually have to work at it. I can't rest on my laurels with that. But so this Cancerian, sensitive, nurturing, poetic, actually, Mercury in Cancer can be quite poetic and caring for people. And because it's the mental, I have, this is a gift also in my healing. I can listen to your behind the scenes. Things that you might not tell other people in your life. You can come to me for a session and I can listen to that, and I can really acutely listen, and I can hear and understand Mercury, but I can also really feel Mercury in Cancer, what that implication is. And then I can combine my head smarts with my heart smarts, and I can see a pattern and a picture from the behind the scenes of your life, almost like I'm backstage and you're on your stage. Actually, I've never thought about it like that, because I love to say I'm the guide from the side and you're sage on your stage. And actually my Mercury in the 12th house in Cancer is kind of exactly that. Like I'm in the wings, and I've got the thing. If you lose your lines, I'll prompt you, and if you need a outfit change, I've got you. And if I see you wobble, I've got a snack. Like that's me, mothering and supporting from the background and seeing what you need that you may not be able to see for yourself. So you can see how understanding that about myself, there's one way where I can go, wow, that's really serving me. I can also see where it hasn't served me. And I think that's the whole point of self-evaluation and self-growth and self-understanding. So that's where my Mercury actually is. And it's a very strong planet for me. Not because it's in a strong place. It's actually in quite a challenging place, because of the 12th house is a challenging place. But it is strong because my sun, it rules my sun, and it rules my Venus, because those two are both in Gemini. But if you remember what the other sign is that Mercury rules, I'm giving you a moment to remember. An unlikely Gemini pause. It is Virgo. So here's Virgo in my chart. Remember, Virgo looks like an M with crossed legs, a maiden with a crossed leg, rather than the Scorpio, which is the M with the spiky tail. But I do want to also point out the color. I know I say these things over and over, but green means, okay, well, that's an earth sign. And we know that Virgo is an earth sign. And as we say this, we learn this. So if you didn't know that, don't stress. Whereas Scorpio is blue because it's a water sign. So that's another clue, depending which way your brain likes to remember things better. And on that note, red is fire and yellow is air. Okay, so because this is a space that is ruled by Mercury, and here you can see that I have Saturn and the North Node conjunct together, that means that Mercury is ruling them too. So in my chart, Mercury is ruling my greatest, brightest expression, my sun in Gemini. Mercury is Mercury in Cancer in the 12th. That's when that Mercury is, that's where his perspective is. I'm sorry about the sun. Hopefully you're looking at the chart, not me coming in and out of focus. So Mercury in the 12th in Cancer's perspective is ruling my sun in Gemini in the 11th. My Venus in Gemini in the 10th. My Saturn in the first house in Virgo, and my North Node, which is actually we're gonna cover that next. Are we? Let me just think. June, July. Yes, we're going to cover nodes next month. That's going to be next month's focus, if I remember correctly, my planning. My North Node is my karma in the first house. So this is very powerful for me. 4 very potent energies. 2 of them are personal planets, how I shine, how I love, what my value system is. And if you think about the story I just told you about how I devalued myself very strongly from my own headspace. And what did I do? My Venus is in Gemini, in 2 minds. My Venus is thinking all the time. I value thinking. I get a compliment and I think I shouldn't value that because now people are going, and then devaluing. Of course, I can take it the other way and I can use it more like I'm using it now to positively use that story to help other people to understand something. Now I've turned it around, or I can teach, and I can teach with different opinions or different lenses or different, I'm pretty versatile in my teaching and I value that. So now I'm taking it into a better place. And then, of course, with Mercury ruling Virgo and the North Node, what we can see here, and it's in my first house. So the first house, remember, is a very prominent house, as is the 10th where my Venus is. And we did Venus last month, and you can see my Mars and Venus up at the top of my chart, kind of both pretty much in the 10th house, to be honest. And here we have Virgo, and Virgo is square to Virgo is square to Gemini, but my Saturn is exactly square, 8 degrees, 24 minutes to 8 degrees and 0 minutes. They're in a square. So my Venus, and what I just said about her and what we've learned about Venus, is squaring off with Saturn. So she doesn't want to be disciplined. Now my Venus gets up in my head, Gemini, and she's like, I value learning a lot of things, and I value being there for a lot of people, and I value working with groups of women, but I also value my yoga class, and I also value, and how do I know what to let go? And Saturn comes into my body and says, hey, you better get some structure, you better get some discipline, or you can value all of those things, the whole crayon box of all the colors, but you're going to crash if you don't prioritize certain things, because Saturn brings in the rules, brings in constriction. And in my body, I have fibromyalgia, I have chronic pain. I've had it for many, many years. I can't remember a time I didn't have chronic pain and suffer from migraines and neck problems and back problems and hip problems and shoulder problems. And I have chosen not to let that be my story, my narrative, my Mercury story. I have chosen for that not to be my thing. However, it is a very powerful part of my life and it's in my body. And what I do need to continually be reminded of, because this one is a hard lesson for me, and Saturn is your karmic work, Saturn is your lessons. What I need to constantly be reminded of, and that's why it's a square, which is tough, is slow down, prioritize. Do less to do more. Look after your body. Nourish yourself, not everybody else. And that, I can say that. I know that that is true, but it is one I still struggle with. I still struggle to know when to let go of things because I got that Gemini energy going, I want to do them all. I want to be there for everyone. And then Saturn, and I love everything I do. This is so much fun. I don't want to lose anything. You know, she gets over enthusiastic at times, as Gemini energy does. And Virgo, I mean, I spoke to Saturn in the first. I didn't even say Virgo, but Virgo herself is like also ruled by the same planet, but she's like, get down to the details. You want to be of service to other people? This is other people, my work. Then you better be of service to yourself first. You better look after your health. Remember, Virgo is also health, healthy habits, routines, rituals, natural health, in fact. And she's saying to me, you find a system that works, because if you don't find a system that works, which is for your dharmic good, this is how you develop in this lifetime, this is how you take it to the next level, you do you first. And through that, you can gift it back. And this is a huge, huge part of my story. And it's also why I had early suffering in myself and in my body and my chronic pain and traumas through my childhood, because as I had to first have that, and then I had to learn how to take it out. And it's a continual lesson. This is not something that's going to go away. It's in my life, right? So that's also really important to remember, that that's my birth chart. Transits are going to trigger it more. Like right now, I'm actually in a Saturn opposition, where Saturn is opposite my natal Saturn in Pisces. And that also means it's coming through my south node, which will be in Pisces. And that is my old karma. Basically, in my south node, and we'll cover this more next time, is just saying I've come in with a deep mystic knowledge. I've come in with lifetimes of working as a mystic, as a sage, as a wise elder. But what I need to practice is being on earth, not just astral traveling, magical dream, communing with the dead. That stuff comes easy to me. What doesn't come easy is discipline, healthy habits, looking after my body, listening to my body, embodying. And that is absolutely true. I have to say, my astrology, my moon work, my red tents, these have been, and my yoga, my meditation, all of the tools that I've been cultivating, Saturn in the first house, next to my north node in Virgo, all the tools I've been cultivating for years have been instrumental in shifting a lot of that perspective. So I can feel I'm living my Dharma, but it still requires constant cultivation and constant work. And that's kind of what it's meant to be, because both the North Node, we're cultivating uncharted territories, and we're doing the work to do with whatever the sign is and whatever the house is. Okay, so now I can say the places where Mercury would be less happy would be in Sagittarius, and he is not really impacting too much there, so I wouldn't panic about that. But of course, Jupiter links to Sagittarius, so that's also in the 12th house. So Jupiter and Mercury aren't super close. Well, they're both about learning and all of that, but they just, I think I mentioned this in the previous video, Mercury wants to bring things into smaller chunks. Let's deal with this. Let's build the puzzle. First we sort the pieces, then we build the puzzle. Jupiter's like, no, let's make the whole planet a puzzle. Let's make art everywhere we go. Let's travel with gnomes and paint cans, and let's just get excessive, because it tends to be everything is bigger, and Mercury is let's compartmentalize, let's break it down. So they just have a very an opposing way of thinking. And actually in my chart, they live in the same house. But that's an area that Mercury wouldn't be super comfortable. So when I have a mercurial transit here, but we'd all be having that. And then also in Pisces, that's also a challenging space. I think I've covered most of the things that I sort of felt were important to mention without bombarding you. I mean, really, it's like the Cindy show. You just heard a lot of information about me, and my neighbor is really getting going with his, well, not my neighbor, my landlord, with his angle grinder thingy. I really hope it's not noisy when you listen to this. But thank you for listening. Oh, sorry. And the other thing you wanted to look at is is what is Mercury talking to? Mercury himself. Mercury is talking to my moon with a square. So what I said to you earlier about the challenge for me sometimes of discerning my head and heart. I mean, how interesting is that? Because I mean, Aries literally rules the head, but my soft emotional heart self is quite tied into the head space, the warrior of Aries. And my headspace is tied into the soft, emotional, sensitive Cancer, the crab, ruled by the moon. So the moon is actually ruling my Mercury because she rules there. That's going to get a little bit too complicated until we've gone through all the planets, and then it's going to be so like, oh, obviously I know Mercury rules Gemini and Virgo, then you'll get better at that, and you'll go, oh, of course the moon rules Cancer. But for now, because we're doing it in component parts, I don't want you to get too carried away. But when we look at our astrology charts, when we see something once, we go, that's interesting. And if we see something twice, we go, oh, that's probably something that the native, which is what we call the person whose chart this is, I'm the native of this chart, that's probably something the native experiences from time to time. And when we see it 3 or more times, then we're like, okay, I can clearly say to you, somebody reading my chart could clearly say to me, your head and heart self is something that you have to constantly be working to discern and distinguish between. Sometimes you probably have a real hard time getting stuck up in your head or overwhelmed by your emotions, or running between the two, because we can see that in numerous places in my chart. And again, I can say to you that that's been a huge part of my struggle in discernment. But then this over here is saying, let's discern, let's get discerning, let's edit. So then again, it's like squaring off here, but it's helping me because it's teaching me how. My Mercury is also squaring my Pluto. That is a big signature, because that's saying your mind is going to be transformed continually. You're going to be pushed continually, because it's my birth chart, not a transit, right? You are constantly going to, and this is in the house of worth, self-worth. So you are going to constantly have to reevaluate, transform, and empower or disempower what you feel about yourself. And I mean, that's just, I could speak into a million examples of that. So this is the other thing, like as we have these conversations on the Zoom, and as you do your own story with Mercury and each of the planets in turn, it's also to start saying, well, I think this, and then you're doing yourself. So you go, that is true. I've seen that in me, or that's how I used to be, but I feel like I've really worked through a lot of that, or I don't know, that isn't my thing yet, if ever. So it's even like as an astrologer, it's really nice to get feedback when I, ask a person a thing and then they give you the feedback and you go, yes, that's a perfect expression of moon square, Mercury square, Pluto. That makes complete sense. It's part of my T-square here. You can see this red triangle. It's called a T-square. Moon square, Mercury square, Pluto opposing the moon. Anyway, I'm going to stop before this gets too complicated. We've looked at one chart example, mine, and you're going to do a similar kind of thing with yours. And when we have our meeting, I am going to answer your questions on your charts. Try to listen to your story first and then reinforce for you what you've seen, and also build upon it with things that I see. Not because I'm going to see better. I mean, I do have more knowledge in this realm, so maybe I will see better. See, I can't even give myself a compliment there. I'm still working on it, but it's also that everybody has a different lens. So what's quite nice even is if other people in the group say, what about that? Like, Candace can say to Jen, what about that expression of that? Then we get a new perspective, because Candace can see something that I didn't see, that Jen didn't see. So that's another way we can start to really build and empower each other to really play and dive into our charts. And I'm thoroughly enjoying this. I'm finding it really, really fun, and I hope you are too, and empowered. Thanks for watching. And oh, look, it's like Mercurial, Two-Face. Like it. Good way to end. And this is the Mercury Show out.